Minister, just on that issue of remote working, just a related issue there, and it comes back to your comment earlier on in the committee meeting where you said that the report on rural development, if it had been produced 3 years ago, would be have a very different focus in relation to remote working, and there's absolutely no doubt about that. And as both of us know from our engagement in previous roles, the absolute determination by some people to oppose outright the issue of remote working, particularly within the public service. And that mindset is still there today. So I've a point and a question to ask you, Minister, on that. The first one is, in terms of remote working, the government and state bodies need to lead from the front in relation to setting an example here. So can you give us any idea regarding the progress to date on the target by year end of 20% of public service workers working remotely? Now, you may not have those figures to hand, but if you could come back and give us an indication, and an indication maybe across your own departments as well, your 3 departments, in terms of those staff that are permanently now working either in remote hubs or working from home. And secondly, Minister, just a comment more than anything. And I think, there have been a lot of negative aspects to COVID-19. But one positive aspect is it has shown many of the naysayers out there the huge opportunity there is in terms of remote working, not just in terms of quality of life and rejuvenating rural communities, but even in terms of our carbon footprint, in terms of reducing our overall domestic emissions. There's a huge opportunity there as well. And it is important that we don't lose what we have gained in that aspect. And I believe, and I'm very concerned, and I've articulated this to the Minister for Finance on a number of occasions. I feel there is a mindset and attitude within some of the decision makers in government to try and get everyone back into city centre working again. And I think the concept behind it isn't so much to protect the other ancillary businesses in the cities, because I think we can look at other innovations in that area, but it's actually to protect the investment funds and the insurance funds that have office accommodation leased out on a long-term basis in our cities. And I think that's fundamentally wrong, that we're going to sacrifice the rejuvenation of rural communities. We're going to sacrifice the reduction in our overall carbon emissions purely to satisfy, some of these investment funds that have bought large office complexes in our cities. The second brief question I have for you, Minister, on a different topic is, and again, if you don't have the figure to hand, your officials may have it, but if they don't, you might come back to me on it and the committee on it. What percentage of the Transition Leader programme funding is funded from the Exchequer? And does it meet with the requirement of the co-funding ratio that has been set down under the Rural Development Programme?
Thanks for those questions. And of course, I know as rural deputies, we're all passionate about remote work, and because it is the game changer that we have been waiting for rural Ireland for a long, long time. And I don't want to let it slip away. Above all things, I want to see it supported, I want to see it working, and I want to see people enjoying a better quality of life in their local communities, because for too long we educated young people and the only place they got a job was in Dublin. But now that can change. They can get a job in their own community and they can be part of that community, and that's what will revitalise the towns and the villages and the communities and the parishes up and down the length and breadth of the country. So just on the fund to help the remote working hubs, we have been doing a lot of work with local authorities through the Rural Regeneration Development Fund and the Town and Village, and they identified the buildings and we help them and we support them in renovating them and in converting them into not just remote working hubs but multi-purpose use buildings, which I think it adds another vibrancy to these premises. The 5 million fund then is part of the town and village, specifically targeted at providing support to kit out remote working hubs. And I was very clear that that would apply to both public sector hubs and to private sector owned hubs as well, because we want them in the market too. There's a good number of them being developed in different towns and villages because they see this as an opportunity. So that fund is there now. It's currently open, and I would encourage anybody that has a remote working hub that needs to do some adaptations to put an application into that fund. Deputy Naughten, when you talk about making sure that there are no barriers to remote work, and you're absolutely right. And I've been doing a good bit of work with Grow Remote, and perhaps some of you are familiar with Tracy Keogh. And Tracy started this off as it's now a social enterprise that we are supporting. But again, it's about helping employers to understand the benefits of remote working. It's helping them to just make that move, because some of them are obviously concerned that it may have unintended consequences for them. So we have to help them to understand the benefits and to bridge that gap between maybe them and their employees, and give them the chance to try it and to work it out. And because I think it's a win-win for everybody. Absolutely. Now, there are some jobs where you can't remote work, and we have to obviously acknowledge that, but there are many, many ways where it can be facilitated. And that's why when I talk about remote working, it's about giving people choices. It's not about telling them they have to go and work here or work there. It's about allowing them to have that choice. And that's why the remote working, the hub network. So perhaps I could see a time when maybe you're on your holidays and you need to take a couple of days into work. So you can look up on the app and you see, where can I get a space where I can go in and work for maybe a morning or an afternoon, and then you can continue your trip around the wild Atlantic Way for the rest of the day. And that's what you call blended, a blended both work and lifestyle. And again, we should we work to what is it they say now? I'll have to get this right. I don't want to get it backwards. It's about working to live as opposed to living to work. So I think that's important too, and COVID has taught us that. Now, in terms of the public service, there is a 20% target as a minimum. In terms of working remotely. There's a lot of work going on there, and I want to continue to make sure that this does happen. And for my own Department of Rural and Community Development here, we're talking about 98% of people continue to work remotely and do so very successfully. So now there may be times when they need to come into the office for a day or two, but again, it's that blend. The Department of Social Protection, which is very much a customer-facing department with 6,500 staff, 50% of them continue to work remotely. And we have managed to roll out an unbelievable amount of services and payments over the last year and a half, and credit, all credit due to them. I can't give you the figures for the Department of Justice, but I do know there's a lot of people from being in the department itself. There's a lot of remote working taking place there as well. And it's something that we want to continue and keep that momentum and make sure that it's not lost. And I take your point that maybe there are concerns about the centre of the city, but I'm not prepared to see the communities and the towns and villages across the country being sacrificed for any one part of the country. This is about regional balanced development, and that's what we want. And there's no reason why we can't look at centre of city living as well. There's opportunities there too, because we all saw what happened when the lockdown came and there were the offices were empty and the city centres were hollowed out. There's no reason why we can't. People bring vitality into city centres the same as it do in town centres. Again, that's something that we should be looking at, is centre of city living. I think, the leader, I better answer it. The distribution of the 65 million of the 70 million transition programme to the LAGs was announced in April. For the remaining 5 million, 3 million is being allocated to support cooperation projects, and 2 million has been set aside to support strategy development for the next leader programme. So 70 million. 20 million is EU recovery investment at 1%, at 100%, and the 50 million, I understand, at 68% is EU funded, but I'll confirm that to you again. And the rate of aid for private enterprise has been increased from 50% to 75%. So I hope I've answered all your questions.
Yeah. Thanks, Minister, for that. My question was in relation to the 4 million of additional transition money that was allocated for this year, as to the proportion of that and the ratio. But you may not have that figure to hand. If you haven't, you might come back to the committee on that.
Yeah, I'll come back to you on that 4 million. Cahir, look, I just, off the top of my head, I don't have it.
That's fully understandable.
But okay. Yeah. So I'll just leave it at that.
Yeah. So if there are no other outstanding issues, that concludes our consideration of Vote 42 on the Community and Rural Development Further Revised Estimate. So in accordance with Standing Order 101, a message to that effect will now be sent by the clerk to the Dáil. We now proceed to an engagement with the Minister on the issue of procurement for local employment services, a matter which has very much exercised the members of this committee over the last number of months. I'll ask members to be concise in their questioning and bear in mind that this meeting must conclude and be adjourned by 11:30 a.m. And just to say, before I bring in members, Minister, that, you know, the Regional Employment Service is set to replace the existing jobs clubs and the local employment services. And these have been assisting communities across this country for the last 25 years, both in urban and rural areas. And research commissioned by your own department, carried out independently by Indicon, has indicated the attendance at the local employment services have been beneficial to those who have used the services. And the concern is that we're going to deny people access to a walk-in service, a person-centred, community-based employment service, and replace that with a profit-driven, results-based process, which will only happen on referral only, and which members of Dáil Éireann have consistently criticised since such a model was first introduced nearly a decade ago.
Okay, thank you, Cahir, and I want to thank the members for their contributions. And can I just say that when I started this process, I had the same concerns that you had, but I'm satisfied, having put a huge amount of work into this and having consulted extensively with the providers at the minute, that we have here a request for tender that will meet the needs of the one person that I am most concerned about in all of this, and that is the person who is unemployed and the person that is looking for a job. So I'm going to just outline and try and answer some of the questions that have been raised. And I accept they're very valid questions, because I asked the exact same questions of my officials when we started this process. Now, first of all, there has never been more consultation with the local employment services. And for somebody to say that they weren't consulted with is absolute nonsense. My department has undertaken extensive consultations with the existing contract providers over the last number of years. And I'd just like to point out what this request is about expanding the service. Well, there are a number of areas in this country that don't have an employment service. What I want to do is expand that service, and that's why this has gone out for a tender. And we will learn from this tender process, because at the end of the day, it's about the unemployed person, that they get all the supports that they need to help them get a job. My predecessor in 2018 attended the ILDN annual meeting and informed all the CEOs of the partnership companies that the current contractual approach was not in accordance with EU and national procurement rules, and that the department would be working to introduce reforms, including open competition for the existing contracts, to meet our legal obligations. Officials from my department engaged in a detailed question and answer with the CEOs following the Minister's speech. In January 29, my department published the Indicon report and hosted a briefing session with all LES and Job Club providers, where Indicon presented their findings, and the department outlined that it was now moving to implement these recommendations. This included the need to amalgamate LES and Job Club services and to award contracts through open procurement. Officials from my department in late 2019 visited all LES and Job Club providers, informing them of the department's intention to procure contracts on a competitive basis and seeking their input and views on the possible design of the RFT and contracts. The department appointed consultants in 2019 to review the public employment service, including the contractors. As part of this review process, the department insisted that the consultants engaged without the presence of the department with nominees from the local employment service and Job Club providers. A series of workshops were organised as part of this process. Officials in my department have been briefing representatives of the ILDN on the plans for the future procurement since 2019, and these briefings have continued on a regular basis throughout 2020 and 2021. In my role as Minister in the two departments, I host a regular forum with the ILDN member companies, and we have provided updates on the department's plan at previous forum. My department continued to engage with the ILDN to the fullest extent possible prior to the publication of the RFT rules, and on the 3rd of June hosted an information session on the Phase 1 procurement process for the interested parties. So can I just be very clear here? We have consulted extensively with the local employment service providers. And I know that in some places they provide an absolutely excellent service. And I know the Indicon review there was referred to. And can I just say that Indicon found that LES on average had a job placement rate of 28.8% when the annual target was 30%. And some would say that's not bad. Indeed, it's not bad. However, I'd just like to point out something else, that this, and when you break it down a bit further, this average covers a significant range in placement rates from 14% to 45%. So you will see there that there are some providers who provide a great service and some who don't do as well. I want everybody to provide a good service, and that is why in this contract there's a minimum price, and that's to ensure that people get the service they deserve. So there's a minimum price in the contract, and I think that that's important to say as well. So I really want to be clear here that the total focus is on the user, and there's a limited cost element in the RFT. I just go back here. My department's seeking, what we want to do is procure high quality employment services, which focuses on supporting those individual job seekers and other cohorts who are furthest from the labour market. This will be a tailored, intensive employment service designed to address the needs of the people who are supported by the service. Bids will be evaluated on the basis of quality and an organisation's ability to access a wide range of supports and services to best meet the needs of their clients. And that's where I think, and I don't want to say too much about the procurement process, but I can say very clearly that the local employment services have a lot of contacts with a lot of different organisations. And on that basis alone, the organisation's ability to access these wide range of services will be evaluated as part of the process. There's a limited cost element in the RFT, which I was mentioning earlier, but it's within defined parameters. So the vast majority of the awarding criteria will be determined by the quality of the service, design, and key personnel, as well as links with relevant local partners and stakeholders. So there's a strong focus in this request for tender on local service by local providers. This is about expanding the delivery here of a high quality employment services across 7 counties. The new service will have a strong local focus, and its fee structure will be heavily weighted towards client engagement and client progression. And I think that's the one thing we all want to achieve here. And we'll all agree it's the client that is the number one person in all of this. So my department will learn the lessons from the phase 1 procurement process and apply them in the design of the multiple requests for tenders that we will publish later this year under phase 2. And I can't stress how much effort and time that we have put in to working with the providers. And I know, this is not a for-profit driven agenda by any manner of means. And can I just say that this is not for profit? It's for the service of the people that need the assistance to help them get back into the workplace. And more than ever, we need that because of the challenges that COVID has presented to us. Now, it was mentioned there about walk-ins. The Public Employment Service, the intro office, offers all individuals who require advice and access to employment services. So the intro office is there, and under the request for tender for the new service, my department will be able to refer long-term job seekers as well as other cohorts to the new service. All referrals will be organised by my department's intro offices, and they will determine the best employment service based on an individual's specific circumstances and requirements. In many cases, the supports to individuals will be delivered through my department's intro offices, or they will be referred to the new regional employment service. If an individual is not in receipt of a social welfare payment, they should contact their local intro office, and they will offer them the supports and the advice that they want. So I think it's important to say that this focus is again on the person that's looking for employment. The job path model, and there was a mention about job path. It's not the case that this is replicating the job path model in the procurement. And I want to be clear that the request for tender for regional employment services is carefully designed to ensure that all sectors can bid for the contract, and the fee structure reflects the intensive engagement required to support those furthest from the labour market. So this is very much focused on the needs of the person, and it's how they can be assisted and helped to the maximum way possible to get to help them get ready to enter into a job. So the job path payment structure it's almost an inverse of the payment structure within this request for tender. Job path has a nominal fee associated with the engagement with the customer, and after that any further payment to the contractor is associated with sustained employment. This means that where the customer does not enter employment, the job path provider only receives the registration fee, but must provide 12 months of employment service to the job seeker. The opposite is here with the regional employment services, where the majority of the payments, in indicative average of 90% of total fees, are associated with engagement and the service and individual progression. So 90% of the fee under this model goes to the provider of the service so that they can put all of the resources necessary into getting the person a job. The 10% is it's an average expected to be 10% of total fees. They will get the last remaining 10% when the person actually secures the job. So I just want to be clear here. 90% of the fee, and there's a minimum price in it, will go to working with the person and giving them all the supports that they will need to help them achieve employment. So I hope I don't know if I've answered all the questions, but I certainly, I hope I've given you a flair for what we are trying to achieve here. And it's certainly not to shortchange anybody. It's to work and make sure that those people who need that service get it. Okay?